in some ways to happiness and to the freedom of all. So the vision of today's webinar is so very noble and precise, and we have a very good apt speaker, Sri Agam Khare, founder at Absolute, a path-breaking plant bioscience and precision AG company. Absolute radically transforms how the world grows and trades. And prior to this, Agam Khare ran India's leading industrial robotics and factory automation company, working across various sectors: food, beverage, and pharma. So, ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts, and we look back to a very interesting session with Agam Khare. I now invite Dr. Avinash Bharti, Chairman ISAS Nagpur chapter, to welcome the August gathering.
Good evening, all.
Dr. Bharti.
Welcome you all. Yes, ma'am. Welcome you all in this August gathering. ISAS headquarter and ISAS Nagpur chapter with chemistry department, Shri Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management Nagpur, organizing today's webinar, that is Future of Food, Feeding 10 billion people by 2050. Today's speaker is Shri Agam Khare, founder CEO of Absolute Food. I welcome you, sir. We are again happy that we got today's chief guest, Professor Y.C. Sharma, Director, Innovation Research and Development, Dr. CBS Cyber Security Services, Jaipur. I welcome you, sir. We have the August gathering of many members from ISAS. I welcome Dr. Chandrachudan sir, who is President of ISAS National. I welcome Saran sir, Vice President. Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, Chairman, Webinar Committee. Then other like Balram sir, Jayappa sir, Adya ma'am, then Sara Khalid ma'am, Nair sir, and all others. And of course, the participants also. I welcome you all for today's webinar. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bharti sir. I request all the dignitaries and all the participants for today's webinar to join us in the virtual lighting of the lamp.
Priti ma'am.
Yeah.
So I'm sharing my screen. Is it visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
it is visible. Thank you, one and all. Now I invite Dr. Raghav Saran, Vice Chairman ISAS National, to give the opening remarks for today's webinar.
Honorable President, Dr. Chandrachudan, Dr. Rajiv, Chairman Webinar Committee, Dr. Adya ma'am, Dr. Bharti, Dr. Nair, and Dr. Jayappa, all of you, Honorable Member of Executive Committee, and distinguished luminaries, Dr. Y.C. Sharma, Director, Innovation Research and Development, Director, CBS Services, and former Dean R&D VGU, Vivekananda Global University, Jaipur. Today's chief guest, Shri Atam Ji Khare, today's innovative speaker, and friends. Good evening to all of you and greetings. My best wishes to each one on the auspicious occasion of Onam. Incidentally, it happens to be Senior Citizens Day also. So, wish all my senior friends also all the best. I'm sorry, neither the chief guest nor the speaker would qualify in this. So, anyway, now, friends, you all are aware of the activities of ISAs. With around 4,000 members strong, spread almost all over the country, and 8 chapters, 9th in offing, we are dedicated to disseminate science from grassroots level. For the first time, if my memory is faithful to me, we are inviting an entrepreneur for a talk today evening. An entrepreneur, needless to say, has dreams, purpose of realizing the dreams, spirit, courage, continuing self-motivation, acquires adequate training, and strives towards the goal with mixed feelings of risk, hope, and uncertainty. All this on their own. In a fast-growing economy like India, the entrepreneurs play a vital role in producing the optimum amount of products and services in response to the demand by the people. Therefore, the economy is usually dependent on the entrepreneurs for its GDP generation. They obviously deserve a lot of encouragement and appreciation for their zeal and approach. Today's topic targets one of the fundamental, rather basic needs after air and water of human beings, us, food, not only for today alone, but of future. The great objective target of feeding 10 billion people by 2050, a big dream. Let's see what Agam has to offer. We all are awaiting. Thanks. Over to you, Mudaliar Madam.
Thank you, sir. Now I would request Dr. Chandrachudan, President ISAS, to give his presidential address.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Professor Mudaliar.
Yes, sir.
Dear Professor Y.C. Sharma, our chief guest today, Mr. Agam Khera, today's speaker, Dr. V.R. Nair and Dr. N.K. Pillai, past presidents of ISAS, Dr. Raghav Sharan and Rajiv Raghavan, vice presidents of ISAS, the National Executive Committee, Chairman of Nagpur chapter, Professor Avinash Bharati, and Chairman of all other chapters of ISAS, and all esteemed members of Nagpur chapter, and the eminent participants, Dr. Deepali Marghade, Dr. Vaishali Meshram, Dr. Swaroop Lakshmi Mudaliar, and Dr. Ubendra Singh, and the invited experts and all esteemed participants of today's webinar. Friends, at the outset, I wish to convey a very happy Onam to all of you. We are indeed, the ISAS feel very much privileged as a distinguished expert in academic activities and impact-making R&D, like Professor Y.C. Sharma is our chief guest today. Former Dean R&D of Vivekananda Global University, Jaipur, and Professor Y.C. Saxena is currently the Director of CBS Cybersecurity Services. Professor Y.C. Sharma is being an academic R&D, academic expert in academic activities and R&D. We are indeed very happy to welcome him as our chief guest today. Friends, today's speaker is Mr. Agam Khare, founder CEO of Absolute Food. His talk is apparently very attractive. It is going by the title, The Future Food, Feeding 10 billions of people by 2050. From a brief talk I had on telephone with him, I understand that Mr. Agam Khaire was part of the 5-member team that former President Dr. Abdul Kalam interacted after Dr. Kalam completed his presidential tenure. For knowing the exact content of the talk, we have to wait to listen to him. So I keenly look forward to his talk and the content, which is very interesting. And I wish to put on record my extreme gratitude to Dr. Raghav Sharan, Dr. Rajiv Raghavan, Professor Avinash Bharti and his Nagpur chapter team for organizing a talk on an apparently very promising topic. So I wish to convey my best wishes to all of you, and thank you all. I request Professor Mudaliar to kindly proceed further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chandrasekharan sir. Now I would request Dr. Deepali Marghade, Assistant Professor, Priyadarshini Institute of Engineering and Technology, to introduce our chief guest today.
Thank you, madam. Thanks, madam. Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our chief guest, Professor Y.C. Sharma, sir, who is a director of very renowned institute. We are very grateful to him for accepting our invitation. Our chief guest doesn't require an introduction, as he is well recognized figure in science field. Presently, he is working as a director, innovation, research and development, Dr. CPS Cyber Security Services, Jaipur. He was work as a Dean R&D, Vivekanand Global University, Jaipur, Rajasthan. He has done his PhD in 2007 from University of Rajasthan. His research interests in the field of material science, thin film, thermoelectric materials, and energy optimization. He successfully designed and developed a low-cost thermoelectric measurement setup supported by DRDO, Jodhpur. He has already completed various research projects of more than 5 million rupees grant. At present, he is working as advisor cum mentor to 3 projects that is sanctioned by RTU TechIP. He is supervised 11 PhDs, 22 PG dissertation and 25 UG projects. He is mentor 10 experiments related to synchrotron radiation at Raja Ramanna Center for Advanced Technology, Indore. He has established innovation hub at 10 different institutions throughout the country, which is supported by IAPT. He published more than 50 research papers in international and national journals and presented more than 70 papers in national and international conference. He is the Vice President of Indian Association of Physics Teacher. He is also a member of American Physical Society and treasurer of Rajasthan chapter of Materials Research Society of India. Apart from this, he is also actively participate in Indian Association of Radiation Physics and Indian Society for Technical Education. Really, we felt honored to have with us such a multi-talented personality. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Indeed, a very eminent personality with so many credentials to his credit. We are fortunate to have you as the chief guest, sir. Now I would request Professor Y.C. Sharma to address the August gathering. Professor Y.C. Sharma.
Namaskar and happy Onam to all. Today is a very pious day of Indian society. Food is worshipped as good as our gods in Indian society, and Onam is a festival of harvesting in Kerala, which is actually the festival of food. I was searching on the internet and I found some interesting information, and one thing which is the Onam Sadhya. Onam Sadhya is the traditional 9 or more course vegetarian meal served on banana leaf. Onam Harvest Festival is marked with a special feast lunch on last day and includes rice and a sweet at the end. So, with this brief about the Onam, I would like to thank all of you, the President of the Society, Dr. Chandrachudan Saab, Vice President of the Society, Dr. Saran Saab, Raghavan ji, Bharti ji, or Dr. Ralapalli, Dr. Surya Narayan ji from Varanasi, other members of the committee, and the members of this society. I am a new entrant and I think आप लोगों ने मुझे चीफ गेस्ट बनाकर कुछ शायद ज्यादा सम्मान दे दिया, लेकिन फिर भी I am thankful to all of you to permit me to be in your vicinity. आप लोग सब बहुत बड़े लोग हैं अपने फील्ड में, आप लोगों को बहुत अनुभव है, and we will be able to learn through your experiences. I am considering Agam Khareji, today's speaker also, and myself. I think we are the youngest one among the August gathering who are there. Sirs and madams, I would just like to put some points in front of you that, as Dr. Saran told to all of us, that we'll be needing to feed around 10 billion people on the earth in the year 2030. Although the food which is produced right now is enough for the feeding of this whole number of population, but due to wastage of food, which is a big problem, not only it is not only a worldwide problem, but it is a problem for Indian society also. We also waste a lot of food. So if I go towards the data, there are around 85 crore people on the earth right now who are not having enough supply of food. Around 14 crores are in a very poor position. They are not able to get the food for enough for their survival even. And we are not, as a society, we are not sensitized enough so that we should not waste the food. We should try to preserve the food as much we can do. And while Dr. Saran was telling about Agam Khareji, this young generation should lead us towards the sustainability of the food items, so that we can feed to the last person of the society who are in need. That day before yesterday, we were talking about the philosophy in Indian terms and Western philosophy with a professor of Rajasthan University. And the major difference which came out was that Western philosophy created tangible items. We were not able to deliver that. That is why we were thought, it was thought that it was established that we are theoreticians, not practicals. But today's scientists like Agam Khareji, जो कि नए एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैं, इस तरह के लोग, they will be able to generate the means and modes so that we will be able to generate tangible things which will serve the society. So I congratulate Agam Khareji for establishing so a nice theme that will be not only knowledgeable, creating knowledge for all of us, but will be sensitizing us, all of us, for today's pastures day, so that we can pious day, so that we can communicate this to our family and friends, that such kind of thinking is very necessary, and the means or modes which can be beneficial for the development of new kind of uh, uh, agricultural aspects, and those aspects through which we can find out the food sustainability are there at the horizon. So with this, I congratulate all of you for selecting such a nice topic and such a nice speaker, Agam Khareji. And with this, I thank you, all of you. And now I request, I will not stay for more time in between the speaker and the gathering. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. I think today Shri Agam Khare's webinar is going to give us a lot of takeaways, where he is going to link artificial intelligence driven adaptive platform for precision in agriculture. So indeed, it's going to be a very interesting topic. Now I would request our chief guest, Dr. YC Sharma, to formally inaugurate the webinar today.
Sure, madam. I request all of you to permit me to declare the webinar open. Thank you very much.
I think virtually we can just give a clap to the opening of, yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Now I would call upon Dr. Vaishali Meshram, Associate Professor, Department of Chemistry, Dharampet Science College, Nagpur, to introduce our resource person, Shri Agam Khare. Over to you, Dr. Vaishali.
Thank you, madam. Just a minute. I am sharing my screen, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, my screen is visible?
No, ma'am, not as yet.
Not it, ma'am.
Madam, now it is visible?
Yeah, it's.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mudliar madam. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce today's distinguished guest speaker, Mr. Agam Khare, who is a founder, CEO at Absolute Food. Absolute Food is a path-breaking plant bioscience company reimagining agriculture by radically transforming how the world grows and trades. Absolute built the world's first universal farm operating system for near autonomous growing across diverse plantation, indoor vertical farms, greenhouses, and open farms. Today, it operates the world's largest precision farm network. Absolute is backed by Sequoia Capital, backers of Cisco, Apple, Google, amongst other. Then Falcon Edges, backers of Alibaba and SpaceX. ADQ, Sovereign Wealth Fund of UAE. Nadir Godrej, chairman of Godrej Group. Kamal Agarwal, promoters of Haldiram and CEO of ITC. Unilever, COFCO amongst other. Plant scientists from over 12 countries have contributed in building absolute core bioscience practices. Prior, Mr. Agam was running India leading industries, robotics and factory automation company working across various sectors, food and beverage, pharma, auto, oil and gas, and steel and cement, and etc. Mr. Agam sir has received a very great opportunity to work closely with the 11th President of India and renowned scientist, late Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, on global challenges faced by humanity, such as clean air, clean water, and clean food, which are the basic amenities of life in which we all are subjected today. Mr. Agam was also an esteemed member of board of several startups across the foreign countries such as UK, Europe, US, and also in India. He is also the advisor to AKTU, formerly Uttar Pradesh Technical University, and several universities across Asian countries. An engineer by professor, Mr. Agam did praiseworthy work in plant biology from Tel Aviv University in Israel. He spent his valuable time in conducting research with world-leading food research university, that is Wageningen University in Netherlands. His capability of managing multiple tasks simultaneously, excellent communication skill, compassion for society, and his ability to work as a good team player and desired team leader makes him highly popular among the peers of entrepreneurship in the world. With this brief introduction, once again, we welcome you, sir. Thank you all. Over to Mudliar, madam.
Thank you, Vaishali ma'am. Indeed, now the wait is over. We look forward to Dr. Shri Agam Khare to address the August gathering. Now I invite Dr. Shri Agam Khare to proceed with his talk.
Thank you, everyone, and happy Onam to everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be in such an August gathering. And in the next few minutes that I will be sharing about what we do and how we do, I would be very happy to engage with all of you to think about this very theme: how do we feed these 10 billion people? Because it is something that has to do with humanity and each of us. Once we have finished the talk, would love to hear your opinion, your suggestions on how we can build this better. I'll share my screen. Just give me a moment. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. So back in 2011, I used to work for the 11th President, Dr. Kalam. And one day we were chatting, and during an evening chat, this topic just stumbled upon, and he was actually writing a book. It was called Target 3 Billion. And at that point of time, we just happened to stumble upon this discussion. How will we feed 10 billion people by 2050? Today, we are like 7.8 billion people. And in the next few years, we will be 10 billion people. And most of that population is going to be added in India and in surrounding countries, developing economies. So if you look at our world today, just like Professor Sharma mentioned, there are about 2 billion people out of 7.8 billion people. 2 billion people are micronutrient deficient in the world today. And about 700 million people fall ill every year because they eat bad food that has lots of contamination because of pesticide traces, etc., colors, etc. And on top of that, there are about 800 million people, about 80 crore people in the world who go to bed hungry each night. And this we are talking today in 7.8 billion people. And what when 2+ billion people get added to the population? Where will the food come from? On paper, we produce enough food today, but that produce is a spread across the world. We don't grow enough for each country in each country. And so that food is traded. And that results in loss. That also results in disparity in how the food is distributed among people. How will that world be where each country could grow enough food that it needs and literally grow everything everywhere under the sun? That was the thought with which we perceived this idea and strive to build a model where we could solve this hunger, and not only hunger, but hidden hunger, the micronutrient deficiency, grow food which was better in terms of nutrition, better in terms of taste, and was absolutely safe for people to consume without any residue on it. That was the vision with which we started this whole journey, which we called Absolute. So this was the first question that happened when we chatted for about 5-6 days. One morning, Dr. Kalam just came down, and I was sitting down in the office, and he questioned me, what do you think, what kind of a world are we going to leave behind for our children, for our youth, and for our parents? And how long can we keep a blind eye towards what is happening? Immense pesticides going in our food, and then we just consuming it because we got to consume something. So though we produce enough food, but most of that happened during Green Revolution because we started using a lot of pesticides and chemicals and other things. Of course, part of it was because of good practice, but a large part of it was also due to use of these chemicals. We can't be building a world for tomorrow where people will continue to eat this filthy food. We need food for increasing number of people, for sure, but we also need better food for people to come in future, because you don't want to build a world which is not resilient, where people are not healthy. We want to leave behind a world which is healthier. And to do that, what are the open paths that humanity has? We definitely will need to grow almost 70 to 75% more food for the increasing population over the next 30 years. This, when we already know that about 60% of world's arable land has already been consumed. This extra food means that we will need to deploy almost twice the land area of India under agriculture to grow this amount of food. Which means, if you imagine clearing of so many forests, twice the size of India, clearing so many forests and taking it under agriculture. This is a threat to biodiversity. This is literally a threat to humanity, because we are playing with the food chain by endangering biodiversity. And today we produce all this food which travels across the world because we produce it across the world and then ship it. So we have apples coming from US, we have pears coming from Latin America, and we have multiple food produced in India which travels to the world. How do you build a world where you also lower down the consumption of pesticides, of chemicals, which eventually kill microbes in the soil and doesn't let them sequester CO2, which then eventually causes massive air pollution? How do you solve for that? So how do you grow 75% more food for this increasing population without really expanding the agricultural land footprint and without costing the planet? And if we could really do this as a human race together, humanity will see success over the next few years, and our children and your grandchildren's probably will actually be living in a very happy, safe world. This led to creation of Absolute. We started Absolute back in 2015. We got together a team of scientists from across the world to conduct very deep research on plant bioscience and plant genetics, etc., trying to focus on just two things: improving and exponentially improving how the world grows and how the world trades. At Absolute, we built the world's first universal farm operating system, which worked across diverse plantations. We took literally every ambiguity away from crop production. So today we operate a platform which you can just simply go and deploy, just like your Windows in your laptop or in your computer side. you can just go and deploy this operating system in your vertical farm. Countries which do not have enough land, like Singapore, Japan, they typically build vertical farms so that they can grow in vertically. Countries which have land but not really large shares of land, they deploy greenhouses to grow it because they have limitation of land, and the world has a limitation of land. So we developed this software which works across these vertical farms, fully indoor, across greenhouses, and across the open farms, which is very common in countries like India and especially developing economies. So this farm operating system works across this diverse range of farms. But this operating system works on a very, very core scientific philosophy, and that is understanding of how plants behave. Just like us, plants are living, and an acclaimed Indian scientist proved that in late 1800s, but the world took almost next 70 years to actually come to believe it. Plants are just like us. If I can take a leap of nomenclature in science, plants can literally see. They have more photoreceptors than we have as human beings. We have like 5 photoreceptors in our eyes, and plants have 15. So they absorb light and they try to understand what is going on around them. Of course, they can't see like we do, but seeing as in a term means understanding what's going around, and plants also understand what's going around. What we understood about plants when we started doing deep research around it on a very large scale across the world is that there were only 4 buckets of things which kind of mattered to plant very dearly. And the first of them was the food that the plant ate. Now, plant eats different kinds of primary, secondary nutrients, and it takes some nutrients from air. And these are certain set of nutrients. Now, different plants at different lifetime in their journey and across the day need different kind of food. We figured out in our laboratory tests which crops specifically need which ratios of food at what point of time in the day and across their life cycle. This is a very standard practice if you go to open farms, but as soon as you start going to greenhouses and vertical farms, you can't really waste your resources because they're costly. And you have to give plant very specific amount of each resource because that is what it will take to grow. And if that fails indoor, then you are in for a big loss. So if you're running a greenhouse, if you're running a vertical farm, in fact, even an open farm, you can't really suffer from a crop loss because that is devastating to a farmer whose income already in countries like India is meager. So we developed this system where you could literally figure out what does a plant really eat. The second bucket that we figured out was that matter to the plants is the region where it was growing. And so we asked a very simple question: why does a cherry plant grow better in Kyrgyzstan than in India? And the basic answer everybody will give you is that the climatic conditions suit it. Now, what in climate really triggers that plant or that cherry flesh to grow in a way which is more juicier than in India? Let's say, hypothetically, if you were to take that example, what really triggers that? So we called the second recipe as environment recipe. So first was food recipe, nutrition recipe is what the food that the plant ate, and the second was where the plant lived. So we figured out what kind of environment does a plant really want to live in. The third bucket that we saw mattered to plants a lot was what did the plant really absorb? So what was the plant really seeing, which we called as light recipe? How many moles of photons were actually falling on its leaf? What were the wavelengths of those of the light that was actually falling on it? We figured out that these wavelengths of photons falling on it and the amount of photons falling on the leaf actually translate into increased or decreased rates of photosynthesis, its ability to build biomass, and eventually deciding whether it wants to grow tall or it wants to grow thick. And we called this third recipe as light recipe. And the fourth recipe that we developed, which was a traditional knowledge from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. All farmers in India really knew it locally. It's called interaction recipe, which is figuring out which peers does the plant really like to grow with. In the modern science, universities across the world, especially in Netherlands and US and Israel, they are studying something called pixel agriculture, where they're trying to study behavior of each plant with the other plant. We also kind of studied this for about 60 crops in our indoor experiments. Now, we created a basic set of these recipes for all of these crops, and eventually started deploying this on field. Now, this is not something that you can make on day one and say that I'm done. This is an ongoing process. So we keep improving our crop recipes with every crop cycle that we grow on either of the farms. So say in our indoor farms in UAE, we would typically grow crop cycles by crop cycles, and through data collection, we'll keep improving our recipes. And similarly, we'll do the same for our farms, open land farms in India. Now, what goes in a crop recipe? To give you very, very basic, top of the surface understanding, we look at very basic things: food that it eats, which is nutrients; light that it is consuming, which is lighting. Wavelengths matter a lot to plants. So whether you're giving 400 nanometer wavelength light, 460, 640, 710, it all matters to plants very, very deeply. Then again, temperature. It does not matter to the plant what the ambient temperature is, but what really matters to it is what is the surface temperature on the leaf when it is actually doing transpiration. So we started figuring out, okay, this is one temperature factor which matters to the plant. But if you imagine a plant growing in an open farm, you would imagine that in a real time, the top leaf may cause a shadow on the leaf below it. And so then we also understood that a factor called T below, which is temperature below the canopy, is also something very important. So within temperature, we look at multiple parameters like T below, temperature on the surface, temperature variance across, averaging across 24 hours, and stuff like that. And so these are some of the factors that we look at which go into creating these recipes. Now, what we simply did is that we picked up each crop, each genotype of the crop. Against that genetics, we started mapping, and each of these crop took us almost an year of study across greenhouses, vertical farms, and open farms before we could arrive at their recipes. What we started doing is that we started growing each of these crop under certain set of conditions which were already known to us in basic biology, according to how plants grow. So we took up those basic boundary conditions and started improvising on those conditions in a vertical farm, in a greenhouse, and in open farms. And we went on figuring out, how does the airflow really matter to plant? How does the position in which it is growing, how does that really matter to plant? What happens on stigmomorphogenesis, which is like bending of plant in a certain direction due to some stress? How does that then impact plant? And how does irrigation really, how does factors like evapotranspiration matter to the plant? And how does real ETC matter to the plant versus the boundary conditioned ETC? And how does relative humidity and photoperiod and sleep matter to the plant? All of this, when combined together, we ran a lot of data modeling on each of these crops. We were literally picking up almost 80 lakh data points every day from our fields, 80 lakh data points. And we were churning this in an artificially built engine, which ran using modern data analytics techniques and machine learning and computer vision. And then using that over the last 5 years, we figured out for some of the crops, to name about 60 crops, how do they really behave? What really changes if we were to change some parameter? And we call that recipe. That is what goes into Absolute's recipe. Our first solution to solving global hunger, especially in advanced countries and developed economies, was to build indoor vertical farms. As you can see some of the pictures from our farms are almost 400 times more productive than a traditional land farms, which means that what you can grow on about 400 acres of land, we could literally concise and grow in about an acre of that land. This meant freeing up 399 acres for biodiversity. You could grow forests there, you could grow gardens there, you could have habitat for diverse species of animals and flora and fauna. This meant freeing up a lot of resource and taking away stress on countries which didn't really have resources, enough land at their disposal. While doing this, we also ensured, how do we improve contents like, let's say, anthocyanin content in plant? How do you improve that? Now, anthocyanin is a free radical absorbent. So if you eat it, there are large chances that you're going to be feeling better than you are off eating the normal food that you picked up from market. So we said, okay, can we grow really more and so that the growers in the advanced countries, they make more money? Can we really improve nutrition, which eventually helps consumers improve their health? Also ensuring that there are absolutely no pesticides that go into it, absolutely zero pesticides getting into it. And can we also ensure that we grow much faster than what you are able to grow on fields? We realized over a period of time that we conducted research that we were literally growing almost 2 to 3 times faster than you would grow on the open farms. So for instance, we were growing spinach and lettuce plants in about 15 to 17 days. What people on field were growing in about 60 days, or maybe about 75 to 90 days in some cases. So what people were growing in 90 days, we were literally growing in 30 to 45 days. Same mass, a better quality, much better texture, much better nutrition, and absolutely zero pesticides. This was what we were able to do through vertical farming. We were the first company to set up a vertical farm in India and conduct very deep science research on all of these crops. Now, if you see some pictures around this, you will see that there are multiple spectrums of light that we are using. And this has come in after very, very deep research, whether the plant needs a UV, some spectrum of a UV to build some kind of flavor, whether the plant needs a blue light, it needs a red light, needs a green light, a warm white. What does the plant really need given the stage that it is really in? And that is the science that we really studied and then translated into a commercial software engine, which is called our operating system for vertical farms. We ran a very similar exercise with greenhouses, where we started looking at, and on the left, you're seeing a variety of muskmelons. On the right, you're seeing a very large greenhouse patch, which is almost 50 hectares in size and growing almost autonomously. So our software literally through sensing, remote sensing, figures out the real biorhythm of the plant, the real transpiration that's happening in the plant, and versus that supplies resources to the plant so that they're able to grow to their full potential. Now, whatever plant, fruit, or vegetable that you pick up, we can ensure that it grows to its full potential in the greenhouse. This means growing more food on that same given patch using same amount of resources, or maybe even lesser amount of resources for humanity. What this simply does, and just to give you a sense, our greenhouse farming yields are about 8 times that of what the farmer grows on field. So greenhouse, we were growing about 8 times. Vertical farms, we were growing about 400 times. And if you could just simply go on democratizing this technology, we felt that a lot of pressure on land could actually be taken away. The advantage with greenhouse and vertical farming is also that you can literally grow it anywhere. You can set it up in a barren land. You can set it up where water is really, really scarce, because this consumes less than 30% of water used in traditional agriculture. And about 70% of the water, by the way, that fresh water that's available on earth flows into agriculture. So we said that we will consume less than 30% water that's used in traditional agriculture. And that would eventually, what that does is puts a problem of scarcity and suddenly flips it on its head and creates an abundant situation. So suddenly water, which is a resource in scarcity, would become in abundance, because we'll take away a lot of usage of it in agriculture. We have started deploying our solutions for these vertical farming and greenhouses everywhere. But in countries like India, we have largely focused on building these open land farms and really revolutionizing how people grow, and then eventually how it trades. We'll come to trade in a bit of time. But these are the 4 recipes that I was talking about a short while ago. They're called nutrition recipe, environment recipe, light recipe, and interaction recipe. And all of these 4 recipes sit on our operating system. We have IoT devices on the fields, and we pull data from satellites on each pixel of the farm. And then that data goes back to our platform, gets matched with some recipes, and then basis deviation, we give very clear to understand, personalized, actionable insight to the grower. So every day when the grower wakes up, he just has to see his screen and figure out, okay, these are the 5 tasks I need to do. That's specific. So absolutely zero ambiguity. I mean, people who have never been a farmer, you can actually deploy the software and just start growing. By doing this, you also improve yield, improve soil health, and ensure that you don't really have to put any kind of pesticide in farms whatsoever, in any kinds of farms. There have been cases where our team has taken off use of pesticides, where pesticides were being used for almost 20 years. Our team has absolutely brought it down to 0. this is not just a financial opportunity. This is a moral obligation to us as human beings. We have to stop feeding our children and our parents and all of us this food which contains poison, because this is literally poison. And if we can do that, this is not just a service to humanity. This is service to also biodiversity. We are safeguarding lives that are below the soil. And in turn, what they do for us is sequester millions of tons of carbon dioxide, which is floating around in the atmosphere, because they simply fix that carbon in the soil. So that is what all of the form of agriculture that Absolute uses today enables growers to do. Whether it's a vertical farm, it's a greenhouse, it's an open farm, your farming is going to be revolutionized, and growers across the broad spectrum today are seeing an increase in yield and betterment in the quality of produce. We'll come to that bit in a while. But this has been happening in India across 9 states, globally in 3 countries, and we are expanding this to about 12 countries now. This is what we've been able to kind of create. We have set up a very clear operating procedure for each crop, and our agronomy team helps grower understand and create very personalized insights for growers, whether you are sitting in Bangalore near a village near Bangalore or a village near Himachal Pradesh. There are very different insights for the same crop for each of the farmers. We also felt that nature has to be taken and considered as a partner rather than a competitor. What we have been trying to do since our Green Revolution is deploy more pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, eventually trying to kill what nature produces. Now, a lot of these microbes are actually very essential to plant health, to health of their roots and shoot system. What we therefore started doing is we started a very deep research kind of vertical on plant microbiology, trying to sequence a number of microbes and see which microbes have what kind of symbiotic relationships with which plants, which bacteria have yet not become lazy because of, let's say, putting excessive urea, and are still very active in the farms and can be deployed across a certain crop. Our team consists of a number of scientists who are like experts into this domain from multiple countries, and they started figuring out which strains would work better. And we simply deploy those bacteria to pull in nitrogen, etc., from air, and then deploy that on field rather than deploying urea. I mean, which is a concentrate of nitrogen, which is very dangerous to human health. So a microbe, a bacteria which could simply pull up this nitrogen from atmosphere and then could simply fix it. We have today studied this for about 60 crops, and we clearly know the symbiotic relationships of these microbes across diverse geographies, different soil cultures, different climatic cultures, across greenhouses, across open land farms, which are the microbes which are in good relationship with those crops. And we simply deploy that. What this does is it makes agriculture input cost almost 35% cheaper for a grower. In countries, developing countries like India, and countries, if you were to imagine, let's say Bangladesh or Nepal, countries which are not financially as good as even India, this comes as a boon. This reduces cost of agriculture. This improves cost of what people can sell their produce at, because this is all grown organically. When farmers started doing it, more and more kind of FPOs, farmer clusters, started coming to us and started kind of asking us to deploy our technology. So what you're seeing here in the picture is a simple palm-sized IoT device, and this simply looks at what is happening on the field. So if you do something that is not needed, or you put something that is not required, this sensor actually senses and tells us back on an hourly basis that you have made a mistake. And we can just simply come back to you and say that, hey, you will lose out on these many kgs of your produce this season because you have not taken the right step. That is a powerful message for a grower. If the grower knows already what is going to happen to its field, he can then begin to improvise on his field. So for the first time in the world, there was a company which was creating options for multiple growing environments across vertical farms, greenhouses, and open farms, not just in sense of understanding what technology would help it grow the best, but also in terms of understanding how you could grow it without harming the environment. we are now setting up the world's largest plant science R&D facility. It's based out of both India and UAE, where we are doing like really cutting edge research on how do you build taste in crops, which is the organoleptic study, along with microbiology study, symbiotic relationships of microbes with plants, understanding everything around plant biology, and merging all of this with the modern data science, which is machine learning and cutting edge artificial intelligence. Today, we have AI models for almost every crop that we grow in whatever geographies and whatever formats of growing that we grow. And we are kind of progressing this research more and more with each passing day. And therefore, we decided to kind of deploy close to about $15 million on setting up this facility, which is going to be the world's largest plant science facility by far that humanity has ever seen. The second question, on the day that I was actually sitting with Dr. Kalam, the first question that he asked me was what kind of a world we were going to leave behind. And the second question, which kind of really shook me, was he mentioned that for 1700 years, India led agriculture technology. For 1700 years, we were the most prosperous nation in the world, contributing about north of 30% of global GDP, which is down to early single digits now. And he said, how do we reset this? How do we bring India back to the glorious days that we really enjoyed? And when we really started thinking about that, not very long back, but in 2018, when we had been kind of arriving at some form of technology towards end of 2018, we clearly knew that we had to build something which would be built in India, but will be built for the world. And hence, we built and are continuing to build our growing clusters across the world. So we are deploying our technology in farms across the world, starting, of course, with India and Southeast Asia, where we are, and Middle East, where we are deploying our technology across largely greenhouses and open farms. Of course, in UAE, it's a desert, so you don't have many options. You will deploy either in a vertical farm or in a greenhouse. And then once all of this is grown, we want our farmers to make more money, for them to be more profitable so that they are more successful and they can lead better lives. And hence, we decided to deploy these farms everywhere in developing economies and then eventually ship this to the advanced economies in the world, eventually creating a win-win for consumers and for growers and for our planet. All the food that Absolute grows today, by the way, is all residue-free. Across the country, residue-free. This is for the first time that such a mission has been taken up at such a large scale. Today, we run the world's largest precision farm network. We have close to about 45,000 acres under management today. And across these clusters, which are spread across multiple states and several countries today, all of these farmers are seeing a consistent increase in yield deploying our technology. We have seen farmers increase their yield anywhere in the range of 30 to 55%. But almost everybody is seeing an increase in yield to north of 30%. People have also been seeing an improvement of their grades. One question that our scientists asked very early in our life cycle was, how does a mango plant or any fruit plant really decide which mango to grow thick and which mango to grow thin, which mango to grow sweeter and which mango not to grow that sweet? How does the plant really decide? Or is it not the decision of plants, but something else? So we figured out that science over the last 5 years for some of the crops, and then we started bettering grades. We started understanding which are the key drivers which impact how the crop looks and eventually how the crop's taste is decided. Growers across these ranges of farms have seen about a 40% improvement in their grades. Now, 40% is the north figure, but this ranges between 25 and 40%, which in the last 10 years, if you were to see, India saw a net increase in yield of about 11% in last 10 years, in a decade. And we're talking about almost 50% here in the last 2-3 years. All farmers working with us, without exception, today are seeing an increase in their income. This is primarily coming from two phases. This is because they're using less resources, less inputs. The cost of that is also about 35% cheaper, and they're able to sell their output, which is all grown organically, at a much higher price. This, solution makes farmer earn almost 75% more. In some cases, farmers have doubled their income, which is what our Prime Minister is also increasingly talking about. But this is like ground reality today across these acreages that we manage. This is across, these states are across north of India, these are in central India, these are in south of India, these are in Middle East, these are in Southeast Asia, and everywhere we have been receiving good feedbacks, and we are continuing to improve our crop recipes, our growing operating systems with each crop cycle that happens. All of this, by the way, we do by consuming less than 30% resources, less water, less inputs, less pressure on land, and freeing up a lot of land for biodiversity and for afforestation. Today, we are about 150 member team, about 15 full-time scientists, and we have scientists from almost every leading research institute in India, from Indian Agriculture Research Institute to IITs to Banaras Hindu University, and about 25 part-time scientists from multiple countries and from leading universities in the world, which include Stanford, Princeton, Cambridge, University of Arizona, and multiple other universities in Australia, in New Zealand, in Italy, in Spain, in Netherlands, and across the world. These scientists work on specific target area for each crop for us, and they contribute their research. Increasingly, more and more people are coming and joining this movement that we call Absolute, because they believe in making our planet better, and they believe in leaving behind a world which is much more healthier for our kids and our next generations. We also have a team of top 30 technologists in the country. These are like the topmost guys in India in machine learning, data science, artificial intelligence, because we figured out very clearly that there are people in India who knew agriculture very well. There were people in India who know data science very well, and there were people in India who know engineering and biology very well. But unless you merged all of those four things, you would really not achieve success in whatever you were doing. And that is what we intended to do here at Absolute. Still very early days for us, but that is the mission that we are on, to really change how the world grows and how the world trades. And we are going to change this, not just in India, but across the world. For billions of people who are going to bed hungry, now there is going to be an option for them to get food which is really affordable, which is really good for their health, and which can grow literally everywhere. So if you just look at global trade, we burn carbon, millions of tons of carbon dioxide every year gets released because we ship commodities from India to West, from West to East, from X place to Y place. So Kuwait grows, it sends it to UAE, we grow and sell it to UAE, and Netherlands grows and sells it across Europe. The world that we are trying to create is a world where where countries will be self-sufficient, where they'll not need to depend on somebody, where they'll be able to feed their entire population with food that is really, really affordable, that is really safe, way more nutritious, and can grow across the year, literally anywhere. What we are taking away is absolutely any possibility of ambiguity from agriculture. A lot of people have come forward to support us on our journey, and we've been very, very fortunate to be supported by some of the most renowned people in India in the agriculture domain, including Mr. Godrej, who runs Godrej Agrovet and Godrej Industries, Mr. Kamal Agarwal, who is the promoter of Haldiram's, and then the agribusiness CEO for ITC, the CEO, CXOs from Unilever, Walmart, COFCO. In fact, the MD of Fortis Healthcare invested in us because he believed in safer food for people, not a food that makes people fall ill. And we have many, many other folks who have actually come forward to help us. In fact, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Government of UAE, when they saw what we were actually doing, they kind of wrote to us about 75 crore rupees in R&D grant, which we are going to deploy over the next year in India. And we are bringing together a team of really great scientists who can contribute to our whole mission and understand what we are doing very deeply. If we are able to kind of go and achieve what we are trying to do, the target is actually to grow from this 45,000 acres to about 1 million acres, which will mean about 10 lakh acres, and go up from this 45% increase in yield or 50% increase in yield to about 300% increase in yield. If you look at global averages, Netherlands roundabout it's at about 4x, 5x of what are the yields in India. And similar levels are being observed in US, in Australia, but for some reason, we haven't yet reached where we were for 1700 years. And that is a pursuit that all our team has taken up, to bring India back to its glorious days, to create some technologies out of India which will go out to the world and change the world once for all, sequestering tons and tons of carbon from atmosphere, creating a safe, healthy world for tomorrow. That's the vision of Absolute, and hence we call this company For People, For Planet. Those are our value systems, and everything that we do here, every person does here, is just focused on people and planet. And I would love to hear your feedback, your suggestions. If somebody wants to partner with us or kind of contribute some kind of research with us, we are developing more technologies around food wastages. So for instance, we are now building some of the technologies around growing food in desert region, where we are building liquid nanoclay, which has capability, low-cost liquid nanoclay, which can actually hold water for a longer time and can eventually, if deployed in an efficient manner, allow forests to grow on desert soil, desert land. We are deploying technologies like that. We are building technologies like that, and we are continuing to build technologies which would allow or increase the lifespan of fresh commodities when they are in transit from, let's say, a country to other country or one state to another state. Today, we see almost about 30% of food getting lost in supply chain, and we are building technologies around it, which will actually increase the lifespan of these food commodities, either kind of coating, which is very edible, which is organic coating, or creating some other kind of technologies which could actually help in solving for food loss. If we are able to do this, increase radically the productivity of food across the world, and grow it anywhere across the world, anything. Plus, if we can solve for this food loss problem, we think that we would have done a massive service to humanity, and we would really look forward to kind of support and guidance from all of you. That's about Absolute, and I leave it to you guys for any questions that you may have.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sri Agam Khareji. I don't know how to sum up your talk, but really very, very interesting. And I'm sure each one of us have been touched by your talk, whether it is a chemistry person, whether an environmentalist, whether humanities person. You have touched all aspects of agriculture. I am so elated, and I would definitely look forward to getting associated with you for our students who would be definitely benefited. I don't know, Khareji, how to describe you, a computer engineer, agriculturalist, or an environmentalist, but you have done a massive job, and thank you so much for being with us today. And before we wrap up the session, there are many questions that have come up for you. May I take them up now?
Sure.
Yeah. So there are many compliments that you've been receiving. Shesha Rao Rapalli says that very interesting and well explained talk, which is going to sustain the need of food by using biotechnology for generations to come. Fantastic and innovative contribution for which we are all thanking you and your team. Congratulations, Sri Agam Khareji.
Thank you.
Then we have V. Balaji Rao, who says that that's what I'm saying, even a banker has been touched by your talk. He's ex-DGM, Central Bank of India. He says the information that you have put forth was very interesting, but please share the recorded webinar. He has quoted the website at which he wishes to be shared. And says that Indian Bank Association for circulating to bank for implementation of the greenhouse financing. So it will be useful if we would be able to share your webinar today with him. So the next question is again from V. Balaji Rao. He says that average land holding in India is 1.8 hectares.
Yeah.
Cost of greenhouse for 1 acre land is approximately 60 lakhs. Such huge investment by small and marginal farmers is out of reach. even if banks and NABARD will extend loan, making unviable project. How to overcome this?
Sure. Great question, Mr. Rao. So here is the answer. I think unless you really need to put a greenhouse, you don't need to put a greenhouse. There are solutions in biology using which you can really solve for problems that occur in a natural environment for plant to grow. We have deployed these solutions across the world, and certainly if biology is understood better, a lot of solutions could be brought in and you will actually not need a greenhouse to grow it. However, if you need a greenhouse to grow it, we have been seeing for many years that the cost of these greenhouses is about 50, 60 lakh rupees. We have brought this cost down to about 24, 25 lakh rupees. And now there is a current scheme by government where they cover up some cost, but we don't want to kind of put government in a spot and kind of put any pressure on them. If you simply deploy greenhouses that our team has been deploying across multiple regions, probably farmers will make out all of this capital in a span of about 3 years. The advantage working with Absolute is that we not only set up these greenhouses, but we commit to buy everything out of those greenhouses because we run a very large global trade practice. So we have a global trade practice where we'll buy everything that is being produced and we'll help people grow. So growers eventually will make money starting from very early days. There are cases where people have made out all their money in about 8 months. So, I mean, there are all kinds of people. If you spend more time with your plants, probably you can make out all of your money in 8 months to a year, all of the money. And then for the next 8 years that greenhouse is, you will continue to see those profits. So let's say you invest 24 lakh rupees today. You can literally make out all money. There is a possibility where you can make out all that money in 1 year and then continue to make that profit for another 7 years. That's how progressive greenhouses can be.
Yeah, thank you so much. The next question is from Jayappa Manjana. He also is congratulating you for your nice talk and asks, what are the challenges in taking this technology to farmers and training them? The biggest problem is creating a market for agricultural produce.
Yes, that's very right. I think there is also a comment before that to elaborate on vertical farming, so I'll touch upon that later. But the key challenge that we see in taking this technology to farmers is that in India, linguistics, language is a problem. So you need to understand local language and you need to deploy your systems in a local language. So changing every interface in local language takes time. We are currently looking for partnering with local universities across India, agri universities, so that they can help us in translating all our know-how in local languages so that people can understand. But apart from that, we have not really seen, I mean, if you look at us today, we have about 45,000 acreages today, and we have about 100,000, a lakh acres of farmers who are willing to come and work with us. This has never happened in the history of India before, that farmers wanting to go and work with a corporate. And that is the situation today. And I mean, when the ICFA, the Indian Council of Food and Agriculture chairman, actually visited one of our farms and farmers actually spoke with him, he was so elated that he went back and wrote a piece on it, saying that this needs to go across the country. And that's when we really started seeing multiple farmer groups coming to us and saying we also want to partner. The only challenge is that we don't have solutions in their local languages yet. We are trying to build those solutions over the next few months. On the problem of market side, I think there is no problem with us because we ourselves run a very, very large practice of selling these commodities on a global scale.
Yeah. Okay. Can I take up the next question?
Sure.
Yeah. The next question is from Rajiv Raghavan, sir. He says vertical farming is costly. How to overcome this?
Yeah. So if you look at vertical farming, I mean, this is a narrative or a story that's been told to people that it's costly. But if you start breaking down, why is it costly? What are the core components where you invest capital when you set up a vertical farm? You will see that 65% of cost goes in electricity. Now, electricity in India is typically costed at about 7 or over 7 rupees per unit. What if there was a way we could bring you electricity at half that price? Suddenly, the cost of electricity or your production goes down massively. Now, that is one way that is available to everybody to bring down cost. But what if we started bringing down the cost of everything in the farm? So for instance, we built the India's first grow LED by understanding exactly which nanometer wavelength at what point of time in the life does a plant need. We clearly understood what wavelengths to put in that LED light in a vertical farming, fully indoor vertical farming space. Now, what people are simply doing using a 62 watt light, we are doing with a 18 or 24 watt light. So suddenly we have reduced the consumption to about half to 1/3. So the whole power consumption has fallen below half to 1/3. Not just that, because of our ability in engineering and capability around building technology, IoT and AI, we have been able to bring down the cost of every part of infrastructure to about 1/10. So literally anything that you will procure from anywhere in the world at 100 rupees, we can give you in 10 rupees. Now, imagine if the news that you read, which said that the vertical farming is very costly and cost inefficient, was also caveated with a fact that now suddenly the cost of all infrastructure is 1/10 and the cost of electricity is half, and the cost of energy, which is 65%, the energy that's going to be used in the farm is also dropped to about half to 1/3. If you mix and match all of that, our vertical farms will pay you back money in as much time that a greenhouse can. It's just that people with larger sums of capital should set up a vertical farm, and people with little lesser sets of capital should go and set up greenhouses. The returns are pretty similar in terms of percentage points.
All right. The next question is from Adya Madam. She expresses a concern about how this message can be spread amongst the normal farming community.
Yeah. So currently, the model that we operate is we go to each farm cluster, like we'll go to a region, a district in a state, and we have picked up several districts across states. We do some demonstration. So we take up on our cost about 2 to 4 acres of land, and I'm talking about land farms for now. And then we demonstrate to growers what is the change that they can see. Once they see, they believe. So for instance, the muskmelons that we grew in a field in Sonipat, and the bananas that we grew, bananas generally don't grow in areas like close to Delhi, but the bananas that we grow at scale in Delhi, very close to Delhi, and muskmelons that we grew were so sweet that, when one of our investors actually made a visit to the farm, it was just a matter of tasting those produce, and the caption they left behind is that they never had tasted muskmelons as sweet as that. So we have kind of very naturally figured out, understanding biology, why will a muskmelon increase its Brix index? Why will a strawberry increase its Brix index? Which species will have a better Brix index? And then what cultivation mechanisms do you deploy to ensure that Brix index is fine? Now, in some cases, it was a generic know-how with farmers that a certain wind direction increases the taste factor in muskmelons. So how do you generate the causation if that wind is not available? How do you kind of adjust for that? Those sciences is what we have brought to the farm in case of land farms, similarly in greenhouses, and similarly in vertical farms.
But thank you, sir. This taste of any food, suppose mainly these fruits and vegetables, wherever they are grown, according to natural taste varies. So that part also you people have studied?
Yes, we have currently studied about 48 agroclimatic zones, and our technology allows you to grow in those 48 agroclimatic zones. We are not in all of the agroclimatic zones. So we can't today say that we are experts into everything, but we are continuing to experiment and build more research. Over the next 2 or 3 years, we will certainly have that confidence to say that we have built it for the entire globe.
And one more thing, just below the water growing farm, that concept, is it that also what you are taking care or looking into that underground farming underwater?
Yeah. So a lot of things that we do in vertical farms, all crops are actually grown soilless. They are grown without soil because soil then puts in a lot of other variations in growing, and you need to control everything when you are growing indoor. It's a high cost growing. So we do not use any soil when we grow indoor. In most of our greenhouses, about 80% of our greenhouses, we don't use soil there also. We use another media or simply grow in water. But in open soil farms, of course, there is soil, which is the media.
Thank you.
So we have the next question from Rajiv Rajan sir. He says that the cost of food items by organic routes are high and not affordable to common people. Then how will you reduce this cost?
So everything that we grows at literally the same price that a conventional farmer grows at. We do not grow anything which is costlier or would cost people to pay more for that produce. That is absolutely against our ethos. We started this company to serve humanity, and the core promise that we made to ourselves was we will not launch anything, any technology, unless we were able to grow that in a price point which is affordable for people, at which people are already buying. And that is why for 5 years, we just continued to be an R&D company, did not commercialize anything. We just continued to deploy capital to do more and more R&D. We are continuing to do that R&D even now. And that's the way we think about it. So all produce, everything absolute is just at the same price that you buy your produce.
And, I have one doubt. Are you looking into the marketing part of this food being sold and all that from farmer to the market that way? There are many problems. Sometimes farmers are not able to transport to the main cities or wherever. Such problems. Mainly, I won't say that go and well, but whatever software wise and all. No doubt, some people are making app and all. They say that it will be available and will buy something else. But still, there are many problems.
Yes.
So there, and these are means not having knowledge and all. So lot of food gets wasted. Though it is cultivated very well, but it is not transported and doesn't come to cities where people need. And once it is not transported, means as good, even if it is made, it gets rotted. So, with software point of view or apps and all that, are we looking into such aspects? That is my concern.
So we built a very unique thing, which is very unique to our company. 30 days before the produce has actually grown, we know what is the tentative volume that is about to grow. And we book all that volume into our trade. So we have a very large trade practice, a trade business, where we ship to multiple countries outside of India. So for instance, today we sent a container to Dubai, we sent a container to Singapore. So we have our shipments going to multiple countries. We also have shipments going to multiple large consumption centers in India. So for instance, we will sell to large FMCG companies, large processors, and multiple other people. So one farmer grows and he grows or she grows according to the way we have asked them to grow. We ensure that we actually pick up everything that's being grown. Today, the situation is such that we have 28 times more demand that we can produce on all our farms combined. 28 times more demand. And therefore, we are going all across the world and starting these farm clusters because we just can't produce enough. So just if that answers your question.
Thank you. And
Mr. Agam Khaire, I am Chandrachoudan here.
Yeah.
I am greatly impressed by your zeal in particular. I think it is ignited by Dr. Kalam and it is going in the right direction. As a mission, it is very good. As a supplementary measures, of course. And in this connection, I wish to be educated on a few points. Sure. I was carefully listening to your talk. The entire process is based on plant science and plant genetics. Is it correct?
Plant science and artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, and does it include genetics or plant genetical modification also?
We don't do genetic modification.
Yeah. So then at some place you have mentioned that you are using sensor to monitor the crops, the entire growth cycle.
That's right.
So can you throw some light on what are the sensors specifically used, that is the sensing aspects, the points you sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you look across the presentation that I showed, in one of the pictures there was this palm-sized sensor sitting on the palm. What this sensor does is it picks up the data around three things: weather, which is microclimate of the plant; soil-based data, which is the fertilizer composition, the nutrient composition in the soil; And the third data it picks up is about the plant. So it can pick up, let's say, NDVI, or it can pick up chlorophyll concentration in leaves, and thereby telling us how is the plant really growing. And there are multiple other parameters though that it picks up, but this is the sensor which is very, very low cost, and we put that across farms, if that answers your question, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
About the pixel agriculture,
Yeah.
this model is already going in the forest in any way, because multiple varieties of plants grow there, including food plants which provides us food, and many medicines, agriculture, herbal medicines, Ayurvedic medicines.
Yeah.
And also there is organized agriculture also, that intercrop many plants are grown. So in what way this is advantageous compared to these models?
So let's say what we can really do and let's talk about maybe an open farm, which is like at scale. So if a farmer really knows, now there are some traditional knowledges. So farmers in some parts of India, they clearly know that banana secretes nitrogen, which is a food for chili plant. So if you plant a chili plant near to a banana plant, there is a large possibility that it will grow well because it's getting free nitrogen. Now these are interactions that plants make in gaseous form. And similarly, many other plants have many other exchanges. This is just one example. We have studied exchanges across plants, interaction across plants. Some of them are traditional knowledge with people, of course. But all of them, almost 40-50% of them are known to people. But the rest 50% are not known to people. And let's say in India we know some things, but they are not known to people in Kyrgyzstan, they are not known to people in Singapore, they are not known to people in somewhere in Europe. And they know something which we do not know. What we have simply done as part of interaction is to bring all of our data together and using experimental scientific research establish which know-how is scientifically established correct methodology or a correct peer group to grow together. We have seen cases where using traditional knowledge crops have failed, spectacular crop failures have happened. And though people were growing those same set of crops for over last 6-7 years or 10 years, in the 11th year they saw a spectacular crop failure. Just because some of the other species of plants were introduced in that field pattern which were not conducive to grow together with this crop variety. We grew, for instance, lettuce plant in one of our indoor farms for once, and the spinach plant growing next to it went from green to brown because this plant, when we actually harvested, secreted so much ethylene that the other plant actually fertilized before actually it should have. And those are things that can really happen and go wrong. And such minute things, especially when you're looking at greenhouses or vertical farms, are very, very crucial. Especially even in the open form of agriculture, these things are very important. Let's say thrips is a variety of pest that comes very often on pomegranate. What it simply does is then farmer does not get the payout that he should get because now there are thrips on the pomegranate crop. Can you really solve that by simply focusing on plant interaction, putting in another species of crop which will just ensure that these thrips don't happen? Or you will use the traditional way of putting in loads and loads of pesticide, increasing the cost of cultivation for farmer and making it unsafer for consumer to consume. Today we have two options. This has happened because we have been able to study in reality what really matters to crops. Who do they really like to grow with? If you look at the world, this pixel farming concept is still in its very nascent stage in terms of scientifically establishing what can grow with which else variety, in what capacity. There are certain crops which are well established, but most crops in fruit and vegetable section are not. And that is what we are trying to change. If that answers
I have two more questions. If you are not tired, may I ask that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you are mentioning about symbiotic relations are modified. What I understand is the symbiotic relations is the basis of biodiversity, which is an important factor in carbon sequestration, and also provision of many, not only food items, many host of many other things required for the human welfare and living.
That's right.
So when we modify the symbiotic relations, does it not affect the biodiversity in a large scale, which will counter the sequestration effect, what you are claiming. I may not be telling maybe some little bit, but then in principle, is it not affecting biodiversity?
Very good.
I have got one more question, so only brief answer you give me.
Yeah. So very simply, sir, to say, what we are saying is that you don't put pesticides on your food, because by putting pesticides, you are killing those microbes. You are killing biodiversity. Rather, you use the inputs, biological inputs that we are kind of bringing to farmers, or even if not, I mean, it's not necessary that you kind of take those from us, but from anywhere in the world, if you start using those biologicals in place of these synthetic pesticides which are killing those microbes, you will ensure that that microbial population increases. That symbiotic relationship will become further stronger, and that will lead to more sequestration happening. What has happened in the world is, because we have been putting in these pesticides, microbes are dying. So soil is not able to sequester the carbon that it should. And the soil health is considerably going down because these microbes are not there to pull in that carbon. Putting in urea, you have made a lot of microbes actually unhealthier. And that is what we are trying to change.
I have studied the environmental balances quite in detail.
Sure.
If controlling the microbes were so easy, we could have controlled the coronavirus by now. But the total balance, the keeping all the entities intact in particular ratio is part of the maintaining biodiversity. The one last question is, you mentioned about residue free. The entire process is residue free. Can you just little bit elaborate on that? What is residue free?
Yes, sure. And before that, I'll just touch upon the point since you mentioned coronavirus.
Sure.
And we are talking about bacteria. So bacteria is not a pandemic variety. Also, any variety of virus, as long as it is not pandemic, will not cause coronavirus. But we don't deal in virus, we only deal with bacteria, which are useful for agriculture and fertility. So we ensure that safety. One, of course, it is not easy to maintain all of that relationship. We don't claim to be maintaining all the relationship, but we have taken a step forward to maintain some of that relationship. And we have seen good progress happen towards crop development by using that. To come to residue free, every residue is basically chemicals that stay on crops when you consume it. So let's say I spray whatever, let's say cypermethrin or whatever, a chemical which is not good for human body on crops, and then you consume it. So then crop has a residue and you consumed it. And today in India, we are a very large consumer of pesticides in the world, significantly large consumer of pesticides in the world, and a significantly large producer. We are changing all of that. We are saying everything needs to be biological. Everything needs to be natural, no more synthetic, and therefore crops have no more residue. So you are on mute.
You are mute,
Yeah,
sir.
mute.
Yeah, I think somebody is muting me. Sorry. Because don't get bored. I will ask only one more question. This the synthetic food and chemically modified food are the difference is only a hairline thin. And when you assess the fitness of such products as a food for humans, the divide is also very narrow. This is what I understand. Can you comment on that?
So, sure. So, you're right, does not eat banana. I mean, banana is organic, but it can't eat.
Yeah.
Plant only eat nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So, you're right, plant eats only certain ultimately elements. Now, you have two ways to look at that. As long as it is nutrition, it is fine. But when you start spraying elements or chemicals which are absolutely harmful to your health, which are carcinogens, then that thin line becomes a very broad line. If I spray some things on food which are actually carcinogen, there is a large possibility I may actually suffer from cancer. Why should I feed anybody in his right mind food that I know for sure is going to be a health hazard? I mean, snake venom, for that matter, is organic and is poisonous. Anybody in their right mind should not consume it. Once you have known that it is poisonous, you should not consume it. And that is what we are trying to change for people. Not consume that.
I was trying to point out, because since you have requested for feedback, because this is an important point to be considered.
Right.
Because the natural food, even from region to region, soil condition, and the fertilizer, sufficient use of fertilizer or overuse of fertilizer, it really modifies the food quality. That also leads to cancer or different type of diseases
That's right.
because of the micronutrient concentration in the body.
That's right.
Because I studied these things in detail. So that this, I think some of these fellows which I mentioned seriously considered. I think this your process what you are engineering, I think it will serve a very useful purpose. Thank you very much.
Sure, sir. I'll take notes of all this and we'll try and take more suggestions on this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
There are four questions. One is
Hello.
Mudliar ma'am, you can ask. Okay. Question is there. Raju madam, you can ask your question.
Yes, I am asking that you are using new technology. Have you tried radiation technology to increase the crop yield? Radiation technology. It is irradiation of seeds.
So if you're, are you talking about radiation of light, which is like multiple wavelengths?
Gamma radiation.
Gamma radiation. Okay. So we have not yet implemented anything around gamma radiation. We will be very happy to understand.
Very good technology indeed. You can try it.
All right, definitely.
There also in genetics also you can have different varieties of seeds also if we irradiate with gamma radiations.
Sure, we
really a great work. It is a need of the hour.
Thank you. I'll come back to you for more details around gamma radiation and how we can use it in our growing methods.
Sure.
Mudliar madam, continue.
Yes. There is one last question, sir. It's from Vaishali Meshram. She says that climate change affects the productivity of the crop largely. How to overcome this?
So there are two straightforward options, greenhouses and vertical farms, where you can simply control the climate, but those are simple things and does not work in a country like India. But I mean, it's costly. So simply, of course, climate changes some things. If you simply understand what does the climate change, what happens when the leaf surface temperature actually goes up after a certain point, what changes in the plant's biology, and if you can adjust for that change, then you will actually have created a kind of solution which will solve for problem. So there is a problem. You have to understand deeply what are the causations that are happening because of that problem and solve for those causations rather than the problem. Of course, we can't solve for sunlight being too heavy, but we can solve for what it does. So typically in a very layman term, if it causes depletion in water content, then you kind of irrigate it. Simple, very simple example, but you can do other things also. If there is a depletion in certain nutrient in a certain if the shoot system is not able to open up, the plant is not able to transpire better, there are ways you can solve it even in a very hot, humid, very cold climate. So that is what we are bringing to table.
Sir, YC Sharma want to ask one question.
Sure.
Sharma sir.
Yes, Khare Saab, I want to just comment on what Madam Nilima told to you, that use of radiation will increase the shelf life. That is what you are looking for. Shelf life will be very much increased with the use of gamma radiation. And moreover, the government of India is supporting establishment of such radiation centers. It was announced in the last budget. So you can see for those opportunities. The suggestion is very good from Nilima madam. Thank you. That is what I wanted to communicate to you.
Thanks, sir. Thanks a lot for the feedback. This is very helpful. We'll definitely look into it.
Over to Mudliar madam.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
There are a few more questions. I think we can take a couple of them. Ashi Shalantri says that what kind of media can we use instead of soil? So
there are multiple media and you can absolutely grow it without media also. Let me go one by one. So the direct replacement to soil you can use is a composition of perlite, vermicompost and coco peat. Coco peat is basically the husk of coconut, the things that we tear off and throw. it is actually very valuable, and India is one of the largest producers of that husk coco peat. So it's very cheaply available. So you can use coco peat, perlite, vermicompost. This is one thing. Second thing you can use is a grow cube, which has good aeration. So you have to look at the aeration percentage within that cube. Third thing you can use is absolutely grow in water, where plants will grow fantastically. And the fourth thing is you can grow it even without water by just misting the plant root and letting the plant soak up the exact nutrient that the plant needs. It's called aeroponics or fogponics. These are multiple variants that you can use. And then there are many, many other things that you can use. But largely, these are some of the few.
Okay. One last question from Mrutyunjay Karmarkar sir. How do you deal with gut and dungle proposals? GATT and DUNKEL.
If you can kind of give me a little description around what exactly you are trying to understand around it.
If Karmarkar sir is around, will he just throw some light on what are these short forms for? GATT.
Yes, actually I don't know much about it, but recently, long back I heard that some foreign, it was a pressure on the government and they signed some agreement where some seeds will be bought from the foreign countries and they will be genetically modified seeds, and the next produce will not have the regeneration capacity. So it was a kind of, some people opined that they are trying to, hijack the traditional ways of cultivation which our country has.
Yes. Good question. Because this is all recorded, so I will not say anything which should not be spoken in a public forum. But there are certain practices going on around by all kinds of organizations which are not good for soil health, plant health, and human health, and they need to be stopped immediately. They are absolutely against these practices, and everything that they're trying to do is, so farmers, if they use our varieties, they can actually grow seeds from those varieties and reuse. There is no reason why we should put burden on farmer and ask him to buy seeds every time, or ask him to unnecessarily deploy pesticides every time, and it can be solved once for all. So that's where I will leave that.
Mr. Agam Khare, that is why I asked the question in a different manner. What your answer is very correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mudliar madam?
Yes.
Just a minute.
Okay, sir. Last question.
Mr. Khare, first of all, I must congratulate you on such a insight and such a thorough talk about this, about the optimization of all the parameters which you have talked about. Whether it is, you have not talked about anything about pH and EH, whether that has got any role for different plants. Does it differ?
Yes, so pH for each plant is different. Especially when you're growing in different media and not soil, then it becomes really very critical. I mean, plants can go to death if their pH remains below or above a certain range in as less as 2 hours or 45 minutes also. So pH is very important. pH is like, your pH of body is neutral, 7. If you make it acidic, then your cells will start to die. If you make it alkaline, your cells will prosper a little, but if you make it too alkaline, then again, body falls to certain diseases. It's the same for plants. They are living. And you can't really play around with the pH, which is what goes into environment recipe, the place where the plant lives. And similarly, electrical conductivity, which is EC, that is as important. These are some of the very, very critical parameters for plant when they are growing. So absolutely important parameters.
Okay, thank you. And another thing, I just wanted to know that whether this greenhouse and vertical farming, both things can be combined together?
Yes, you can do vertical farming in greenhouses where you replace the LED lights and do it under sun. A lot of hybrid structures similar to that are coming up in India because it just increases your productivity. So typically 3 regions in India are the best to do it. Rajasthan, Haryana, and Gujarat. These are the best 3 regions if you're planning to do that.
Wonderful. I just wanted to know one more thing. All this, such a detailed work, how people are executing, how big your team is.
So, as I said, we are about 150 full-time people today, which has about half of the team is scientists, PhDs, double PhDs, from multiple places across the world. We have very good advisors. I mean, somebody who headed NASA's mission to grow food on moon, he advised us on this project. Similarly, people from European Space Agency to multiple other folks, I mean, leading scientists across the world, from US to UK to, I mean, even China for that matter. They have been very helpful to us in what we have been able to build today. This has taken us last 6 years to build. It's not building.
That's wonderful. And congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir, for your talk. Mudliar madam, proceed further.
Yes. It is now my proud privilege to present the citation of certificate of excellence. Sir, may I?
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir, slightly bigger, if you can make it.
It is not expanding, madam.
Okay. Okay, sir, no problem. I will just read it out.
It's not visible.
Sir, go for presentation mode again.
Yeah.
Yes.
It appeared again, it went off. Go to present now and then share this slide. Redo it, sir.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is indeed my proud privilege to read out the certificate of excellence. So Indian Society of Analytical Scientists, ISAS headquarters and ISAS Nagpur chapter, in association with Department of Chemistry, Sri Ramdev Baba College of Engineering and Management, Nagpur, in recognition of the outstanding work, is happy to confer this certificate of excellence on Mr. Agam Khare. He delivered an insightful and motivational talk on future of food feeding to 10 billion people by 2050 on August 21st, 2021, during which he shared his immense insight and expertise about utilization of automation in the agricultural sector and highlighted the need of next green revolution using technological advancements for the sustainable development of our country. The talk in this national webinar synergized immensely with the objectives of ISAS in promoting excellence. May I request Dr. Y.C. Sharma to virtually present the Certificate of Excellence to Sri Agam Khare.
Thank you, madam. On behalf of all of us, I present this certificate of excellence to Sri Khare, who has shared his real experiences with us. And these will be groundbreaking experiences for the Indian agriculture farming. And I think we'll be requesting him to share his experiences with the new generation, that is the students of agriculture in Rajasthan. I will request Mr. Agam Khare to accept our invitation whenever we will be able to request it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Very nice and informative talk.
Now, I request Dr. Chandrachudan sir, President ISAS, to present the Certificate of Excellence to Sri Y.C. Sharma. So, the letter of appreciation. The Indian Society of Analytical Scientists headquarters and ISAS Nagpur chapter in association with Department of Chemistry, Sri Ramdeva College of Engineering and Management, Nagpur. This certificate is presented to Professor Y.C. Sharma, Director Innovation R&D, Dr. CBS Cyber Security Service, Jaipur, for his valuable contribution as chief guest in the national webinar by Mr. Agam Khare, founder CEO at Absolute Foods on the topic Future of Food, Feeding 10 Billion People by 2050, organized on 21st August 2021. I request Dr. Chandrachoodan sir to do the honors.
Professor Sharmaji, thanks a lot for your august presence with us today as a chief guest. And this is just our very honest and sincere appreciation for your kind gesture. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I now request Dr. Upendra Singh, Scientist, Jawaharlal Nehru Aluminium Research and Development Center, Nagpur, to propose the vote of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, I am waiting for last 20 to 25 minutes just for this purpose only. And after a long time, we had a very good, webinar along with the discussion, which covers almost from basic science to environment to economics to social issues. So it was really wonderful to see today.
Yes.
Now I formally say a very good evening to one and all present online here. As all good things come to an end in life, so is the webinar today, this evening. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you all dignitaries today. On behalf of the ISAS, I extend a warm welcome to all the participants in the virtual gathering. I would like to express my gratitude to all esteemed participants, dignitaries in the webinar for their presence and contribution to make this webinar a great success. I extend my gratitude to our honorable chief guest, Professor Y.C. Sharma, Director Innovation Research and Development, Dr. CBS Cyber Security Services, Jaipur, to take out a time from his busy schedule to grace the event today. Thank you for your inspiring and encouraging us with your words today, sir. A special thanks to Dr. Chandrachoodan sir, President ISAS, for providing immense support to make the webinar successful. I extend my gratitude to Dr. Raghav Sharan sir, Vice Chairman of ISAS, for his opening remark and leading from the front to organize webinar even in this pandemic situation. Further, we are grateful today, today's esteemed speaker and resource person, especially Sri Agam Khare Sahab, CEO Absolute Food, for giving an excellent coverage to his speech. Idea for future food and feeding 10 billion people by 2050. It was really wonderful the way he presented his talk and the way he defended the questions. It was really, for me, it was really very wonderful and encouraging, and I hope it will continue to so. Well, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling week ago. It requires planning and word eye for the detail. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues who know their job and the result oriented to, and I would like to name a few. Dr. Rajiv Raghavan sir, Chairman Webinar Committee, ISAS, for his address to August gathering and smooth organizing the events. Dr. Avinash Bharti Saab, Chairman Nagpur chapter, for his welcome address to the August gathering today. He always being instrumental in organizing the program. Dr. Dipali Margade, Associate Professor, PIT, for introducing today's chief guest, Professor YC Sharma sir. Dr. Vaishali Mishram, Associate Professor, Dharampet Science College, for introducing today's speaker, Sri Agam Khare sir. Finally, I would like to thank especially to Dr. Swaroop Lakshmi Mudliyar, RCOEM, Nagpur, for her perfect webinar comparing and her multidisciplinary support as and when required during conducting the events. On behalf of ISAS and my personal behalf, I thank everyone who helped directly or indirectly to make this event successful. Thank you everyone once again for making it a great success. And I would say, if end is well, mean all is well. So I hope I have justified. A very good night to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this is not